Just a very new Sincerity intro. Just like we start talking about how we're going to start talking about it.
All right, so
welcome to the show. But yeah. yeah. Would that be ironic though?
If
starting the podcast, talking about how we're going to start the podcast.
Right.
Is that too meta, or is that sincere? Because that's sincerely what we're doing.
Well, I feel like a lot of philosophical ideas, it's sort of just less a reality of the world and more of a perspective. So I think it has partially to do with our intentions. But I don't know, if you're looking at it from like an objective, can things be ironic or sincere? I think it's more, you see, when you get into the idea of like layers of irony, then you kind of get into the idea of double negatives a little bit.
Yeah. Like, can you be like, what if being ironic is part of someone's sincere personality? That's who they really are.
Yeah.
Well, then you get like a layer, and then that just goes to it all goes weird. But I think it's pretty sincere. Yeah. Because like we sincerely didn't really know how to open the podcast, so I mean it did its work. It did its job.
Yeah.
Do you think New Sincerity is going to catch on though? Because like nobody really knows the term. You'd think more people would know the term.
I think it has less, because the term is just like a label that it's just something you call it. I think the attitude is coming back though, because I feel like, cynical nihilism and everything, which has permeated our culture and our collective minds to a certain critical extent, and I think people are just kind of getting sick of that a little bit, right?
Yeah. That was big in that whole 90s thing is sort of passé.
Yeah.
It's cool to care now.
I never liked the 90s. I didn't know, because I felt that they were in kind of an awkward sort of almost teenaged middle phase, where it's like you came right after the 70s and 80s, which were very stylish in their own way, and you're just starting to develop these new groundbreaking technologies that are very much in their awkward phase all on their own. So you get kind of this bastardized fashion almost, with its like really bright colors and everything, which are just way too overbearing, and like weird patterns. And then you get like
the whole grunge thing.
The grunge thing to an extent, yeah. I like grunge a lot.
I like it too. It was sort of a response. Yeah, it was very obviously a response to, what they saw as like a consumerist sort of deal. But it wasn't awkward sort of teenage years.
Yeah, but then you had like
not as awkward as the early 2000s though.
Oh yeah, those were an awkward time, very much so.
They were sincerely awkward.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say for certain which was more awkward, though, because, I mean, I was only born in 97. So I can't really say I'm a true 90s kid.
Well, it's interesting because, like, so many people, like, I don't know why the 90s, but, like, a lot of people, like, identify with a decade that they didn't experience. And so their whole experience comes from sort of almost memes, really, sort of things that people like remember, right? It comes from an image of the 90s that never really existed.
Well, I think do you think it has to do with just sort of like the 80s was too long ago, the 90s had just sort of was coming to a close, it had come to a close, the TVs are still doing reruns of these shows, there's still like maybe their older siblings, if they're not a true 90s kid, maybe their older siblings, right, had a lot of stuff from the 90s that they got to experience.
I think a part of it too is also that the 70s and the 80s sort of blend into each other a little bit.
A little bit.
Like the 70s and the 80s, people don't have as much of a distinct, like the 60s. The 60s, now that's a decade. People think like hippies, Kennedy, Cold War.
Very distinct, overt cultural movements.
Yeah, that the 50s and the 60s, people have like an image in their head. They think they see the 50s, they think like black and white, Leave It to Beaver style. You know, the image of the family at the dinner table, Rockwell paintings.
Yeah.
The 60s is hippies, but the 70s and the 80s, they have a distinct style, but they don't have a distinct style compared to each other. I don't think.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right. Maybe my dad would disagree because I kind of brought this topic up, the topic of 90s kids up when I was having lunch with my parents this one time. And he was like, yeah, 90s kids, like the idea. I don't think he knew about it beforehand, but he kind of agreed with me, but he was like, and I was talking about Hegel, and I don't know really enough about him to talk about him in length yet. But soon, I've got a book.
Soon. You'll have to do that because there's this one communist kid in my political studies class, and he keeps talking about Hegel. And like, I feel like he doesn't really get it.
Yeah.
I feel like he's just trying to name drop because I know this guy. He's kind of that sort of dude.
Yeah, maybe. I only know little bits and pieces of his philosophy, but one part, hopefully the source that I learned from didn't bastardize it at all, didn't warp it. But the idea that he rejected the idea that over the course of history, everything collectively gets better. He argued that each era got one thing in particular very right. They used the example of...
Does he like go through the eras?
No, this was a very condensed...
Typical
cop-out.
Was he French? No, he was German, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was German, but I'm sure this guy's one of the great philosophers of all time. So I think he's got something to him. But this was just an introduction, sort of what he was generally about. Video on YouTube from the School of Life. We're not sponsored.
So what were the examples?
Well, the example they gave was the Renaissance, where he argued that their treatment of the mentally insane was a lot different than it was today. And where it was, they didn't institutionalize insane people, they kind of let them roam free and be part of society, but they viewed them as sort of a people who push the very boundaries of reason, to the very edge. So I think...
They always called it madness. Like nowadays we refer to them as something called... they almost thought of them as like an additive, like something was added to their brain and their brains were overloaded, as opposed to now where we see them as deficient or handicapped. Yeah. We think of them as like have less reason, as opposed to back then when they thought they were like, they had an abundance of like creativity, or they had like spirits in them or something like that.
Yeah, they're no longer mad, now they're mentally ill. It's an interesting distinction, and that's a cool idea in itself. But yeah, the point is that the way eras handled certain things was generally better, and I think I think just examining things with my general knowledge, I think it seems pretty true. I mean, I can't say definitively, of course, but
I think it'd be. I don't know, because like I think it'd be hard to boil it down to just one thing that each era got right. Especially,
well, I don't know. Maybe that was just the way they condensed it.
Maybe it'd probably be like a one thing, but that one thing being really really broad, or like maybe it's a couple things. Because like I'm pretty sure more things happened in the Renaissance than the treatment of the mentally ill.
Definitely
some important shit going on in that era.
Yeah, maybe what he was actually talking about was the way they viewed intellectualism.
Maybe he's using that as an example of how they...
Yeah,
how
an example within example, maybe.
Sort of like that's like that's an example of like their whole general thought, and the general thought process of the Renaissance is the thing that they got right.
Perhaps.
Do you think that'd be good for... Do you think that was a better way of treating mentally ill people?
Well, it depends on the illness, I suppose.
Yeah. People that like need... people that need something... that definitely, they gotta have it, and they can't get it themselves. You gotta have it. But for people that like can function, they're just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it was kind of, there was less stigma and negativity, but yes, these people who, in some cases, maybe not at the time, but if we applied that philosophy to our era, you know, a lot of things are treatable. Like, you give lithium to someone with, I think, schizophrenia, and
Mm-hmm.
there generally are good results and everything. Like, these are treatable things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting question, mental illness all on its own, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because, like, since the brain is, you know, where thought and personality arises from,
Mm-hmm.
then you kind of get into the question of, you know, how much of this illness do we actually consider an integral part of the person? Even if it's curable,
Mm.
are we changing them, you know?
Yeah, that's the thing with ADD and ADHD
Mm.
that I find, because I won't say I don't think it's real, but I don't think it's like an illness.
Mm.
Because the thing about an illness is that it has to be, the way, I think the best definition of mental illness
Mm.
is that it's abnormal
Mm.
and that it's harmful. It's got to be those, you know, two things. Right?
Yes.
And the question is ADHD harmful? Because a lot of successful people have ADHD and they use that to, you know, drive their work. Maybe it makes them more creative.
Yeah.
And if you take that, though, you can apply that to other things. Like, what about people with schizophrenia that are, well, they only have a little bit of it. But actually, I don't know if you can only get a little bit of schizophrenia.
Just a little bit of AIDS.
Just a little bit of AIDS, yeah. It'll only kill you just a little bit.
Yeah.
But, yeah, what if they've got, you know, schizophrenia, but they're still functional, but it makes them, like, really creative or something like that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and
It's an ethics question. Should they be treated? Can they decide to treat themselves? Are they in the right place? Or
Well, when it comes down to something like that, I think the individual definitely has the greatest right to make that decision. But you know, it's tough. Like
But like, what if the individual, they would choose treatment if they were? What if they were the type of person where after they start taking treatment, they're like, yeah, I should have been taking treatment the whole time, but like while they're doing it.
But what if the mental illness affects the decision? That's a good question.
It kind of reminds me of uncontacted tribes in the Amazon, and like, because like the policy for that is you're not supposed to contact. It's almost like Star Trek, right? You're not supposed to interfere. You're not supposed to let aliens see your spaceship because it'll like affect their technology.
Yeah.
But we're not supposed to contact certain tribes in the Amazon that haven't been contacted by the rest of humanity. But like, I feel like if you did contact them, they'd be like, yeah, we want modern medicine and all that.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of,
it's sort of the it's sort of like a little bit like what's his name, you know, who wrote Narnia and stuff,
C.S. Lewis.
C.S. Lewis, his moral thingamajig, like if someone believes that it's their moral imperative to force their ideas on you, then it's just kind of a crazy thing. Like, he didn't believe in it, he believed it was a bad thing. But yeah, it's an interesting question. Like, I think there's a little bit of kind of like I think when it comes to for I think this is a bit analogous. Hopefully I'm not going on too much of a tangent, but for take intelligence, I feel like, you know, this is one of my earliest sort of very truly philosophical ideas in my current sort of philosophical phase, but where I was thinking about I was thinking about ignorance, and if ignorance was bliss, and I was thinking, and I had come to the conclusion, yeah, ignorance is bliss, and I was telling a friend of mine at the time, who was a bit of a philosophical person himself, about my conclusion, and he was like, well, what about enlightenment? He just sort of posed the idea. He's a very free-form thinker. He doesn't, but so that got me thinking again. I was like, and that sort of led me to believe that on one end you have ignorance, and that's bliss, and then you've got this middle part that's just generally knowing, and that's where you have pain and stuff, and then you have enlightenment, which is bliss but in a different way. And so I think
it's almost like you got like there's like problems, there's knowledge, and then there's solutions, right? Like you can, in the middle part, you have you have problems, you're aware of the problems. When you're ignorant, you're not aware of the problems, and you don't have the knowledge to fix them.
Yeah.
But it's okay because you're not aware of them. In the middle part, you've got, you're aware of the problems, but you don't know how to fix them. And then when you're enlightened, you have the problems, but you know how to fix them.
Yes. I feel on the topic specifically of intelligence and stuff, sort of using. I feel like the Genesis sort of Garden of Eden story is very analogous to this, where it's kind of like humans in the Garden of Eden, everything's good, and then they ate the apple, and then they know shit, and they're like, oh fuck, we're fucked.
Things are pretty shitty for a while.
Yeah, things got pretty shitty, but basically when you hit that point, when you leave ignorance, run like hell towards enlightenment. Like it's the middle part, the middle range that's kind of bad. I don't really know what point exactly I was trying to make there, but I've when it comes to mental illness like that.
So like for uncontacted tribes in the Amazon.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing for that is culture, because like it'll destroy their culture a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, is culture worth protecting if it's bad for people?
If they have high infant mortality or high mortality in general, stuff like that.
Because people like talk about sort of how good the past is. I feel like everybody's sort of guilty of nostalgia, and they talk about how good the past was, and they talk about how people had more meaning of their lives when they were farmers and salted the earth, and they're like, oh, look at these children in Africa. They don't have anything, but they're still happy because they have a soccer ball made out of garbage bags or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you know how high their infant mortality rate is over there? These real happy people. They say Costa Rica is the happiest country in the world, right? But I'm like, yeah, they still get AIDS though, more than they still get. They still have to worry about like fucking, I don't know, malaria or whatever they have down there. Zika. I don't know if it's gone that far north, but I mean, you give up some of your culture for technological progress.
Yeah, but I feel when it comes to sincerity, a kind of a problem with sincerity is really finding is that the truth is kind of messy. Like your sincere self is kind of messy. Like when I thought about the idea of being an authentic person for a long time, and I don't necessarily, that doesn't mean that I don't fake, like that doesn't mean that I don't fake enjoyment or whatever to please people. Like if someone's like, oh, will you come to my rehearsal or whatever, and I go, I don't enjoy it, and then they ask me if I enjoyed it, I'll say, yeah, it was all right. Like, I won't stretch the truth too far, but whenever I make a sort of semi-lie like that, it always comes from a true place. Like, if they ask me to elaborate on it, I will tell them genuinely what I liked more than something else. I may work the specific ratio of good to bad a little bit, but it always originates from a true place. So it's kind of messy, like on the topic of mental illness. I think it partially has to do with, do you view this as sort of part of them, or do you view this as an additive? Kind of like we were talking, except now it's kind of reversed. But yeah. But when I'm talking about enlightenment and everything and bliss and sort of things it's sort of the idea of, I think, reconciliation and acceptance and everything. I feel like I don't know. There can be like a happy medium, maybe, or something like that. Like you don't.
I don't know. I don't think that's what sincerity is about.
Well,
like
yeah,
I think like you can have like, like you can have good intentions, and you can be pure in your intentions, but that's sort of like that sort of goes back to what if a person is inherently ironic, and I think that's sort of, I don't know, skipping. I think that's sort of almost taking the easy way out. It feels like.
Almost.
And that to be our true selves, we have to, be our true selves. Have a window to our inner soul, good or bad. So that means telling your friend if you don't like a recital that you don't like it. I mean, you could still go, and you could say, I don't like the recital, but I like you, so I'm going to go anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, this doesn't make you. Probably not going to make them feel pretty good, but
no. But that's kind of the thing. Like with sincerity, you take the good with the bad, and like before, being non-sincere, lies are just lies. You want to convince the person, and it's kind of like the 3 stages, like I talked about before. There's the non-sincere, and then there's the awkward sincere, and then there's the accepted sincere, where you start being sincere.
I feel like if you're sincere for long enough, your environment adjusts to you. I feel like it's almost like
it becomes an accepted facet of your personality.
Yeah, people understand that, like, I think
I
think if you're
they become enlightened about it.
Yeah, it
kind
sort
of
rubs
bringing
off
it back
on
to
them.
that.
So, like, I think if your friend, if you're sincere for long enough and people know it, then if you go to your friend's audition and you tell her that you don't like it, I still feel like if they know you well enough and they're,
then they'd be prepared for that.
They'd be prepared for that, but they'd also respect that, they'd respect that you respect them, right? And eventually they'd start being more sincere. It's like, I don't know, I feel like I've been trying to become a more sincere person, but mostly that means just telling a lot of people that I don't like them, which it's.
Well, I think it's
you got to be a savage sometimes.
You do though,
for straight up brutalist honesty, but
yeah. Like one problem I have is that sometimes I'm too polite to push people away that I'm not really interested in interacting with. And like I said before, I can see the good in a situation a lot, and that can sometimes be a bit of a problem because that becomes like an excuse, right? That's a problem. To be, you gotta, I don't know where I was going with that.
It's almost like your primal, your primal desires. I think of it as sort of like your primal, what you want or what you would do if there were no consequences, living like that. And sometimes it's not the best thing, but but I think we've gone so far from that reverting back to saying what you mean is, I think it's a system shock that's needed.
Yeah.
All right, something to say. I had a good segue too.
Yeah.
I still have it.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, it's like I heard somebody blog. He was talking about how Obama will be the last president to be liked because we've got so much data or we've got so much information about what people are like, that we know all the dirty secrets about the presidents from now on.
Thanks, Internet.
It all came with the whole grab 'em by the pussy thing with with Donald Trump, that sort of started a whole thing where from now on every president is going to have a scandal like that. It's just going to be from here on out, and that's going to change the way people think. People are going to start accepting it more because every president's going to have that grab him by the pussy moment, and so people are going to start. And when everybody can see everybody's search history, everybody's going to have dirt on everybody else, and it's all going to cancel it out.
Yeah.
So people are really, I think we're in an awkward age before we get to post-privacy. Because I wouldn't say I don't believe in privacy, but I think it's overrated.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit overrated because I think it comes back a little bit to if you have nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear, right?
Yeah, I don't think it's that too much that. But it's kind of like sincerity, you know? It's like if you don't hide anything, but that gives you a sort of sense of power, right? Because it forces you to be who you really want to be. But we're still in that era where everybody thinks that they've got things to hide.
Yeah,
we're not in that. We're in that awkward sort of middle stage between, everybody being able to have, their public sphere and their private sphere, and we haven't yet got the enlightened era where everybody knows, everybody's porn habits.
Yeah. It's just a matter of progressing to that point. Like we. As I was saying before, it's kind of it's all about the placement of values, I think. Like we value privacy because, well, we kind of value it as an inherent principle, all on its own, that people should just have privacy.
Yeah, it's sort of a hanger-on from the days past that people, privacy for the sake of privacy.
Yeah.
When privacy isn't, I don't really think privacy is the important thing. What really matters is power, because privacy does matter right now because we live in a society where, if you espouse certain things, the government's going to put you on a list.
Yeah.
And it's all about who can do what to you when they find out, right? But we shouldn't be living in a society like that, because like people talk about corporations invading their privacy, right? I'm not afraid of corporations invading my privacy. I'm afraid of the government invading my privacy because the corporations can't show up at my house and arrest me.
Yeah,
they don't have the same sort of power. I mean, they have soft power and influence, but the worst they can do is try and sell me something, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, I think what most people take issue there is that there's just this collection of data linked directly to you, just floating out there.
But it's all about
Not
who
floating.
can. But that in itself might not be so bad. It's about what people can do with that data. We gotta take away the tools that people can use that data for, right? It's like having, it's like having a bunch of bullets, but it's all about what if there's a gun around.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Something I was going to bring up before was that this kind of gets into, I guess, set theory a little bit in the idea that in the context of psychology and stuff, because like again with mental illness, if you think about your mind as just being a circle, and do you think of mental illness as being a separate either intersecting circle or a circle completely inside of that? Yes, like it's all about how you break down, how you level, how you break it into steps. Like what are your most fundamental things? Do you think that if you change enough of anything, you become a fundamentally different person, or do you think that only certain set things determine? Like if I was to lose, like if I was to lose, I don't know, my like if my views were to change a whole lot, do you become a different person?
Like, does your personality change?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Well, it's not just that. It's about more about the fundamental idea of who you are, identity itself. And it's kind of it's a very big question to get into, but we shouldn't dive too deep.
I don't think things like political ideology or religion or any sort of like higher order ideals, higher order ideologies, sort of things like that, things that I don't think they fundamentally change or affect who people are. I think people are like, I think there's a deeper sort of level of personality, more primal thing that no matter what you change, like on the top, the sort of almost subconscious, sort of the below level, the below influence of who you are doesn't really change.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the reason I sort of think that is because people can walk around believing in radically different things, but like on the day-to-day basis, everybody acts sort of the same, right?
Yeah,
you can have people that believe, people believe that Xenu sent the alien spirits down the volcano, but they still get up in the morning, make eggs, go buy groceries, go to work. They act the same as everybody else, and that's because the brain is split into, I think these two different levels where there's the day-to-day sort of functioning part, and then there's the sort of higher order ideals. And you can have, somebody believe in the, alien spirits, that they're possessing us. And you can have, somebody who thinks he's, the reincarnation of Gandhi, and they'll be sitting next to it, or they'll be standing next to each other in the line in the grocery store, right? They're doing they both get up and they both exist in the same reality, and they can both interact with each other without killing each other, just like everybody else, despite the fact that they believe, some pretty interesting theories.
Yeah, so ultimately you think that people never truly change. It's just a surface level self that changes.
I think you can affect the deeper layers.
Okay.
But I think it takes very different sort of things than people think.
Okay.
I think that I think it's more of a mental, like you gotta physically change the brain. I don't think you can just will it. Like I think, for example, boxers, people that get concussions, their personality radically changes sometimes. Like if it's really bad, they'll become more impulsive. They'll become more sort of manic. And it changes on like a fundamental level like that. They still might believe the same things. Like they still, they still might be a Catholic. They still might vote for the same type of people, but their personality has changed. But it's because of getting hit in the head too many times, as opposed to something like a spiritual enlightenment.
Yeah. That's a good. I think that's a pretty robust theory. What I was trying to get into a bit before about enlightenment was that once you get out of ignorance, basically there's no going back. So you have to progress forward from there, right? Like you can't. Well, you could theoretically.
Not without something like a lobotomy.
Yeah. I mean, you could theoretically unintroduce technology from a primitive people, but it's kind of that seems a bit amoral.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you shouldn't try undoing the bad things you've done. You should try coping with their consequences now. It's kind of like if I had access to time travel, I don't think I'd try and go back and assassinate Hitler because there's too many unknowns. That's just kind of my philosophy. It's done. It was horrible, but we're dealing with it now. And I mean, this far down the line, things are all right. It's not like it ended the world. That would be a different case. If Hitler was successful, maybe. But if something more like cosmologically speaking came around and ended all sentient life or something like that, then yeah, I'd probably go back in time and try and change that.
I think would you still do the same thing if you couldn't go back to the present?
If I couldn't go back to the present?
Yeah, would you still do it, or would you just be like, fuck it?
Like stopping an apocalyptic event, right?
Not like stopping an apocalyptic event, but like changing history. Would you change history if you couldn't go back to the present?
That's tough. Like,
because like a lot of what people think, I think the main driving force when it goes back to the people not want to influence the past. I think the main driving force is that all of our stuff is in the present and could be affected, and we don't want to come and like we don't want to walk in and like.
That's true.
I think it's a sort of selfish thing, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I think based on my philosophy that I even if I did have the option of coming back to the present, I probably wouldn't do it. Based on that, if it was a cosmological, apocalyptic event, I'd probably do it because I mean it's either I'm alive in the past or I'm dead in the present. But when it comes to something like that.
Because I think it's more like everybody thinks they can go back in time and change the future. But I mean, they fail to realize that there's millions and millions of people that live in that time that are all trying to change the future as well. So what makes you think that you can do it too much more than them? The only difference between you and everybody that actually lives in that time is maybe a little bit of knowledge and the fact that you actually get to see what happens. So you're more of an observer as opposed to this sort of. Yeah. And is it really, if you can't go back and see what the future holds, you're basically just like everybody else.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, what about the possibility if you make it worse?
I don't think that's too probable though. Because I mean.
Yeah, I mean, if you assassinate Hitler, what's gonna happen?
Like, you could make it worse, but I mean, like, any single one of those millions of people in that time could be trying to make it worse, too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And I think humanity's pretty robust. I have faith in us.
I think, I mean, like, the odds that another dictator worse than Hitler would rise to power seems kind of slim. But I can't really answer the question exactly because of my basic fundamental philosophy that I've accepted, where I wouldn't do it even if I could come back. Like, I can't really answer. It would have to be I think it would depend on the specific thing, right? If say I loved someone so unconditionally that I could bear the thought that they had died, that the world is poor without them, or whatever. Maybe then I would go back and like stop their death or something like that, even if I couldn't go back. Kind of like in spoilers in the Butterfly Effect, if you've ever seen that.
I haven't actually.
Oh, okay, but it's pretty good. But yeah, it would depend on the specifics, right? Anyway, but about. About kind of moving towards this sort of sincere, universally sincere culture kind of thing.
The thing about sincerity is it's sort of like being brutally honest is sort of the thing where until like everybody's doing it, it's going to be hard to catch on because we live in a world where everybody's got sort of a perfect facade up, and sort of bringing up the dirt is abnormal, and that's sort of everybody else, and you're basically putting yourself in a lower position than everybody else, but when everybody's lowered themselves to the same level of having all their cards on the table, then it's sort of it's culturally expected. It's not so much of a radical thing.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing about sincerity. Is that it's sort of moving us towards a sort of holistic, sort of moral, ethical view of the world, right? Which this conversation is a lot more ethics-centric than I expected. But, like, the reason that many ideologies sort of don't produce perfect results is because I think to some extent they aren't followed to a T, or that everyone isn't subscribed to it. I certainly think there would be less terrorist attacks if everyone was Muslim. But, it's the puzzle isn't done until all the pieces are in place, kind of a deal. Because for sincerity to work on a universal level, everyone needs to subscribe to the same amount of transparency. Right?
Not everybody. I think just enough people that the tables turn.
Yeah, I suppose.
Because right now it's sort of like having like what's the opposite of it? Like being fake. Right. Right now.
Fallacious.
Yeah, being fallacious or facetious.
Yeah. Being
right
fellatio.
That's pretty. Love of blowjobs is the most sincere thing I can think of. But it's sort of a self-sustaining system.
Yeah.
Where you've got enough people that any abnormalities are sort of stamped out. But I think once the tables turn and there's like maybe even a small majority, then it becomes a self-sustaining system as well. Where it becomes weird to try and, hide some. It becomes weird to be, people that are fake are sort of pointed out.
Yeah, that would be a good critical point to reach, of course. But I'm talking about like moral systems, like basically do unto others. You can kind of look at that as probably being beneficial to the whole, but as a person subscribing to it, you could potentially be in for some shit, right? But imagine if everyone subscribed to it. Then it would be great, but it is a bit more nuanced than that.
Or like pacifism.
Yeah.
Or like the type of pacifism that doesn't believe in self-defense, right? People that, people that would rather let their country be invaded than kill innocents or something like that.
It's sort of.
It's got to be like if everybody in the world didn't kill each other.
Yeah.
It's sort of like anti-gun people. The anti-gun lobbies. They're like, if everybody in the world didn't have guns, then we wouldn't be able to kill each other. Yeah. But if a single person
gets a gun,
subscribe to that, then everybody's sitting ducks.
Yeah, that is the problem. It's sort of the difference of, is a philosophy defensive or is it sort of passive, holistic?
I think the most important marker for an ideology is it self-sustaining?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's things that a lot of things have been tried in the past that aren't self-sustaining. They don't work. Like they don't have an intrinsic motive for people to follow them.
Yeah.
Like something like it's got to be, you need the greedy bastards to be able to get in on it as well as everybody else, right? You can't just have ideology for ideology's sake. It's got to have motives. It's got to have rewards. That's why I think capitalism is sort of the most powerful ideology ever created, because it's so self-sustaining.
Yeah. And I definitely agree for at least the present time. I used to be kind of cool with the ideas of socialism and everything. But thinking about capitalism, it is a very robust system. And
it's because it's got so many intrinsic rewards, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of, everybody knows about its problems, but the basic tenets of capitalism are that it's all about providing services for other people, and it has an intrinsic motivator to help others, basically.
Yeah.
To provide them with, in the form of providing them with services, in the form of mowing their lawn.
Everybody kind of wins, but the only problem with capitalism, I think, is that what if we get to a point where we have where we have everything we could possibly need, sort of the Star Trek thing where they have machines that can create anything. And I mean, I think at that point the question almost kind of becomes, well, it's not completely, you don't completely avoid the ideas of economic systems that way, but I think
sort of like it's just post-scarcity sort of.
Post-scarcity. It's just a very different playing field.
I think that at that point we won't really need capitalism.
Yeah, that's the thing.
But the absence of capitalism is definitely not socialism, the way people think it is.
Yeah, that's kind of true. Yeah.
People that there's a lot of the post-scarcity people. I don't know too much about their ideology, but there's definitely a group of people that are post-scarcity, but they tend to be typically Marxists.
Yeah.
which I don't really understand why.
Yeah.
I think if we get to the point where we don't need capitalism, then we also get to the point where we don't need government. We don't need we don't need systems in place to protect us from each other, and we'd basically just be a bunch of people wandering around Earth, trying to have fun, which doesn't sound, maybe that is, maybe that's what the idea of utopia by anarcho-syndicatists or anarcho-Marxists who believe in a classless government society or governmentless society, but it's you don't even need to put that sort of label to it. It'd just be a bunch of people wandering around trying to make the most of their lives. And I think once we get to the singularity, I think technological process is heading in the same sort of direction. I think that a lot of people sort of see a negative view of the future, especially with automation. A Marxist will also talk about automation and how once machines take all the jobs, then we'll need to have a universal income is what they talk about. But once everything is made by machines, once we get to that technological point, things will be so cheap that we don't even
need money.
Yeah, we don't even need money.
Yeah, it's a post-economic.
It's a post-economic thing.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with AI as well. I think AIs will take over the world and whatever. But I think humans will upgrade their own bodies before we get to that point. And we'll upgrade them to the point where we can integrate that sort of technology so that we become the AI. And I think way in the future, I think we get to the point where humanity is basically almost like the physical embodiments of AI. And we're basically just sort of spirits wandering around the universe, making art and trying to have fun. And that's the sort of the idea of the perfect future. And I think we can head there as long as we get to the point where, we integrate technology so that the rise of technology is good for us instead of just separate from us. So that improvements to technology is also come with improvements to the physical, to humans' physical form. And this is sort of that's sort of the central tenets of transhumanism. Yeah. Which is, I guess I subscribe to, a source of many very good science fiction ideas.
Can you describe what exactly transhumanism is?
It's basically a bunch of people who believe in the attempts to better humanity through technology, more specifically the human body. They're all about things like life extension, immortality, cybernetic enhancements, sort of stuff like that. Basically making people into, crazy cyborg things. But a lot of people sort of are scared of something like that, scared of radical changes in humanity and human society. But I mean, human society is going to radically change no matter what we do. So we might as well just, see how crazy things can get, because it's going that way anyway.
Yeah, that's kind of my the philosophy that I've been touching on a little bit throughout this, where it's like it's headed in that direction. Probably can't stop it, and it's probably going to be extremely hard, if not impossible, to go backwards. So you may as well get there and just try to deal with it. My dad, I was having a bit of a conversation with my dad about. He was talking about the rise of AI and automation, and how that will essentially erase jobs. And I was talking about how, we can't exactly impede technological process just to preserve the economy exactly. So we may as well find new solutions.
I'm saying we should go full speed ahead and see how crazy things can get.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, what purpose really is humanity if we don't take risks with it, right? People talk about the end of humanity. Well, it's not really the best thing for in and of itself, right? If humanity ends, it's exactly the same if a single person ends in that person's mind.
Yes.
Like if I were to die tomorrow, it wouldn't really matter if the rest of humanity died with me, because I wouldn't really.
You wouldn't know.
Aware of it.
We're trapped in our own minds, right? When a person dies, the world dies with them.
But I think that we should be we can afford to take risks.
Yeah, yeah.
Because otherwise, what's the point of being alive and being human if we can't, take risks and try and make leaps and try and do crazy things, right?
Yeah.
Because even if we go out with a bang. Even if we accidentally create this sort of crazy technological system where AIs rule over everything and I don't know, humans are like harvested for their organs or whatever. We get the bad ending. At least we did something, right?
Yeah.
At least we did something.
Yeah, at least we didn't cower worrying about the worst possibilities.
Exactly. Because there's probably alien species everywhere else in the universe that are still cowering in their caves, and then their species dies out before they can ever achieve something grand and monumental.
Yeah.
They think there's a gap almost, or like a barrier for alien societies. That the gap or the barrier is heading up in human history. They think there's a certain time in every society's existence where technology gets to the point where it wipes them out, and they can't get past this this level of history or something like that. Just the way they are. It grows so fast. It grows too fast and it collapses or something like that. And humanity is rapidly approaching that point. But I'd have to know more about that theory to talk more about it, though.
Yeah.
I'd have to know like the specifics of this, what the barrier is.
Yeah.
But if humans can get to the other side and make a self-sustaining technological system, then we've achieved something that no other alien species has been able to, or that very, very few, and we become, I don't know, we can join the Galactic Federacy or something. I don't know.
But the great thing, moving into the future, the great thing about the philosophy that is Sincerity is that it's a sort of a pure philosophy. It faces the moral problem kind of head on, which is good, because if you're dealing with a kind of a subversive philosophy, especially one in morality where one could say it matters most, if you're kind of living in this dream world, this kind of fake constructed world for so long, it's just a matter of time before it kind of crumbles down. Like it's all about laying it all out on the table and dealing with the reality.
It's so uncomplicated that you can basically, it gives you time to work on something else, right? You don't have to worry, because think of how much of humanity is devoted to putting off an image, or like putting out an image, like whole industries. The money, if we can, make whole industries obsolete, the money that would go into those industries would instead go elsewhere.
Yeah, it's that kind of
make them obsolete, and then all the people, for example, I'll just use an example. I don't know, maybe like the makeup industry or something like that, or like cosmetics, sort of the founding feature of fakeness. If this is sort of an economic sort of
perspective.
Yeah. This is the broken window fallacy. If all the money that goes into that, if people will lose their jobs, obviously, the whole industry collapses and goes obsolete. All the money that people spend on makeup, which is quite a bit of money, they'd have that money and they'd be able to spend it on other things, which would grow the economy in other areas.
Yeah.
So that's a part of technological obsolescence that people tend to forget about, is that if an industry is made obsolete, then the money from that industry goes elsewhere, goes into the rest of the economy.
Yeah. It's kind of makes me think about renewable energy, which is sort of a similar thing, where it's like, even if we still have fossil fuels right now, there's going to be a point in time where either they're not good enough or we really do run out of them completely.
I think we're at that point now.
Yeah, but I think it's that kind of point. Whether or not we are, I think, is kind of irrelevant. It's the fact that we're going to get there eventually. We could face it now. We could put it off. I don't think putting it off a little bit would be the worst thing. Not I mean, in a general sense.
For the transition, yeah.
For any transition kind of thing, like putting it off a little bit might not be the worst thing, but I think it's good to get things over with.
I think we could have made the fossil fuel industry obsolete at around like the 60s. I think we've already reached that point with the invention of nuclear energy. The only thing is, we could be having a society right now. It's just that things, invested interests have kept nuclear energy sort of down. They've kept research on it down to the point where it's been suppressed so much that we're still dependent on fossil fuels. So I think getting to that point, it's not so much I don't think it's so. I disagree. I think we have to focus more on laws and society and things like that. We're not just going to automatically get to sustainable energy just because technology. We need, social technology and social progress as well. Because like we could have already reached. It's not so much the technology, because we've already had the technology since the 60s.
Yeah.
It's about letting ourselves use that technology.
Yeah. But like from an economic perspective, yeah, you're gonna lose jobs, but you're gonna lose them eventually. It's just get it over with, move on, find new industry, that kind of deal. Just get it over with. If it's not now, it'll be later.
Yeah, and then eventually we'll get to post-scarcity as quick as possible, and then we'll figure out then we have more time to figure out what the hell to do.
Yeah, but reeling it back in, like the philosophy that I've touched on many times that I keep talking about, like I described it, bliss, knowledge, enlightenment.
Yeah, I was about to say, it's the same sort of thing. We're in that awkward, you don't want to extend that awkward middle phase.
Yeah.
And that's what people tend to be doing, right? In the past there was, blissful ignorance, and then, most of human history is the awkward middle stage where we're not in the post-scarcity just yet. Yeah.
I call that philosophy just the progression of three, just kind of as a little package name for it. But I feel like it's a good kind of way to divide things. I think 3 is a very natural division, because if you have a line segment in geometry, right? You have 2 endpoints and connection between them. It just seems very natural to me. If you're looking at 2-dimensional things, at least, or 1-dimensional, which is how ideas manifest typically, 1-dimensionally. Enlightenment in this case, like it's about acceptance. It's a transcendent philosophy. It's sort of thinking above and beyond current things and current attitudes, and looking at the big picture, be it chronologically, or in terms of a more literal magnitude, or it's just reaching sort of an enlightenment in any area, right? Which is that's kind of what sincerity is all about, a little bit.